We remember our ignorance only when we remember what we have learned. We must already know something before we can attend to what we are learning. We must have ideas before we can observe that we were once without them. Reflective memory, which makes us conscious of the passage of one cognition to another, cannot go back to the beginnings it supposes them." End quote. Reflective memory places us before contradictory tensions, what can be called a structural infirmity. For memory can find no trace and has no memory of its emergence. Memory is unable to remember the conditions that made it possible and cannot account for its own genesis to the extent that such a gesture assumes the existence of those faculties it seeks to explain. Because no observable traces of prehistory or of the earliest stirrings of consciousness can be reasonably ascertained, Condillac, for his part, reverted to a notion of hypothetical or conjectural history, which, prevalent among the empiricists of the latter half of the 18th century, handled the problem with philosophical urgency, but elicited the dismay of social scientists. One such being, an Adam Ferguson, protested that it confounded the provinces of imagination and reason, of poetry and science. Empiricism did not counter the objection, but recognized that as a discursive practice beholden to factual ground, it could not construct much of an argument by relying solely upon hypothetical demonstration. Casting about for empirical support, Condillac took recourse to the story of a wild child discovered in the forests of Lithuania in 1694, and incorporated this particular form and performance of idiocy into 18th century philosophy. Leaving aside the fact that the wild child is constituted as story, its inclusion in the philosophical text was seen to function as an empirical supplement to speculation. A fable of origins, it supplied the missing links to cover the transit between the state of nature and man, between original forgetting and culture. Making a fairly typical reference to such a child, Lord Monboddo states, "I consider his history as a brief chronicle or abstract of the history of progress of human nature from the mere animal to the first stage of civilized life." While Condillac's inclusion of the wild child of Lithuania allows for the appearance in his demonstration of a metaphorical lure of the state of nature, he situates him within a hypothetical history. Condillac observes that when the child learned to speak, the prospects faded for his giving a retrospective account of his experience in the forest prior to and without language. As soon as he could speak, he was questioned concerning his former state, but he could remember no more about it than we can remember what happened to us in the cradle. Drawing a blank about the events preceding his initiation into speech, the child, no longer an enfance and capable of speech, demonstrated that memory is an effect of culture. Indeed, it was perfectly natural for him to forget his first state. His life was a sleep, interrupted only by dreams. If we were pursuing another path, we would feel compelled to enter the scene of this interruption, to interrogate the status of dreams in terms of their inherent linguisticity. But let us remain within the flow of unhampered interruptions with this 18th century dream team and leave the other team in the future of this unanalyzed, if seemed, dream. Given that the wild child cannot remember his origins, the philosopher has found legitimation in reverting to hypothetical history. Hence the section on the wild child of Lithuania, being of no more use to a philosophy of memory than a wild child of lithium might be, concludes with a chapter, "The Memory of One Who Has Been Given the Use of His Senses in Succession," centering Condillac's famous imaginary statue capable of giving a complete account of itself, of that dark scene in which memory and consciousness struggle into being out of pure sensation and pleasure and pain. So there was a hierarchy of wild children. One of the most celebrated of the wild children was Peter of Hanover, whose discovery, he was caught in a tree in the woods outside Hamelin in 1724, made him an instant celebrity. Soon after his appearance, it was learned that he was a congenital idiot, the son of a widower named Krüger, who had recently remarried. Many philosophers and natural scientists saw Peter as exactly the person for whom they were searching, end quote. Yet another prestigious signatory weighed in on this matter. In Mere Nature Delineated, Daniel Defoe, who had been reluctant to endorse the myths surrounding wild children, that they ran on all fours like animals and climbed trees, or for us, were caught swinging Tarzan style, nonetheless confirms Peter's importance. Defoe reminds his readers that philosophy and its like had not simply brought an idiot upon the stage and made a great something out of nothing. The wild child responds to a specific philosophical need, being the very creature which the learned world have for many years past pretended to wish for, one that being kept entirely from human society so as never to have heard anyone speak, end quote. Philosophy will have found what it was looking for. This is always something to be on the lookout for, and that should start all sorts of alarms signaling for you. So when philosophy finds what it was looking for, which is to say that it more or less invented the lost object that was meant to confirm its theories. A philosophical wish fulfillment, the creature inserts itself into an imaginary trajectory. In accord with the understanding of 18th century empiricists, Defoe sees idiocy as that which, enjoying no access to language, is furthermore bereft of feeling, soul, or passion. Disabled in terms of feeling, the idiot exemplifies language deprivation, marking a loss that, according to Defoe, abolishes the scale of human affect and a basic relatedness to things. The idiot conjures the, and then there's, I'm a very close reading of what Defoe is saying. So, which is to say that the idiot is part of nature, but is also an effect of the erasure of naturality, a figure of lost literality. So is the idiot part of nature? Is nature already an effect? And so on and so forth. This is where Wordsworth could come in, but the defective cornerstone of his demonstration already shows up for Defoe as the logic collapses in on itself, knocking out a wall in the empirical house of idiocy. Now, much more can be said about the induction of wild children, savages, idiots, and children into the realm of philosophical speculation, and it would be important to investigate more fully the peculiar yet crucial status of these minorities as philosophy conducts its adult raids. From Socrates' predatory urges to Kant's racist assignments, philosophy has demonstrated a need to impound those who cannot speak for themselves, who have not reached a certain legislated majority, though Nietzsche may be seen to have turned this around when he invited the animals to participate in a new tropology. In the case of Wordsworth, and including Dostoevsky, we are faced with the figure of the idiot for whom language is not entirely foreclosed, though absences, the predominance of muteness, and a repertory of stammers govern the scene of idiocy.